Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. As you may have noticed, we did not do a Mondays last week between traveling to Japan and just not really being able to find the time to do it. By the time I came out, it probably would have been Thursday, and by then I figured, you know what, the questions are going to stay in the YouTube comment section, and they probably won't go out of style, because I'm sure many of you asked them after FanFest came out, so I figure I should be okay to just take 2 weeks ago's questions and do them this week. So it's still on a Monday, at the very least. Just skip the Monday. So I don't want to talk too much because I actually have some things I want to do around the house before the day ends, before the Sunday ends, because that's when I'm recording this. So let's thank our Patreon sponsors and let's get into the questions, shall we? So for those of you who may or may not be familiar, we have people supporting over on Patreon who basically have been combating hashtag demonetized on YouTube for the past however long. It's been a much rougher life on YouTube, although things go up and down. It depends on the time, but we definitely want to make sure to thank these people. Now, I hadn't remembered before this recording, but luckily I've remembered them at this point. I do have a few name change requests, and I do have the list of the things I was going to adjust up. We're just going to leave that in the video, so I'll call myself out for the lack of professionalism. So first we have our Patrons of Light. Of course, we have Khuja Cross on Jenova and Kurenai Oni. They have gone above and beyond to support, both providing images so you guys can see who it is who's going above and beyond with that support, and occasionally asking questions that I don't know if I'm going to answer. Kurenai, I'm talking to you because I already read what your question's going to be, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to take that one. So we'll see. Maybe we'll see what mood I'm in halfway through, but thank you to both of you for supporting as much as you have over the past over a year. We, of course, have our long list of sponsors, and luckily I remember who goes where in the two names I forgot to adjust. So first we have our standard sponsors. We have Kromgar Holborgson of Gilgamesh, Kevin, Wabutalia, Alma Elma, Dark Lumina from Jenova, Marianne, Ramil Gaming, Sabo Empire, Mizra, Red Wings of the Baron FC from Zalera, Cidus, Oreo, and Shiva, Syd Hellwind of Gilgamesh, Afro Ninja from Malboro, Cheesecake from Leviathan, That Lame Weeb, Ashen, we have Cerberus, Fafarian, Rendil, Stevie-Rex, and Neon. We have our elite sponsors, one of which is a new one, and I did get that message. We have a new elite sponsor by the name of Batar Garl. So thank you. Made sure to get that name on the list without forgetting. We also have Scumlord, Itsumi Amarillo of Gilgamesh, Ravik, Quardrakens from Fanfrit, Sigdraig from Balmung, Edgefair on Ultros, Jerica, Emma, Zernik of Orc 13, I think I got that right. Chris Suzuki, Crazy Meter from Midgar, Rynoet from Cactar, Carol, the other name that wanted to be changed. There it is. I recognize it. And for that, I even wrote the pronunciation down. Serafina Edelise. There you go. Made sure I got that name fixed. No problem. Senchi, Shadowlink, Gontomberry, Dom, Asuka Wig from Jenova, Limilla Nelhah of Bigger, Sarmasur, and the Fennel family, Janhyua Yotsuyu, Kifik and the Great Eagles on Exodus, Katayoshi from Khuja, Skia Symphonia from Ragnarok, Rylanator Westaus The Purple Warrior, Edric Red Steel on Exodus, Lexxie Valentine, Mantaru the Rivivus FC from Zodiark, Sour Cream and Chives from Jenova, Rynoet Chikara, Gawish Valfar of Siren, Phoenix Down FC on Goblin, and Saren from Zodiark. Finally, we have our elite sponsors, Vapatiama from Diablo, Shadow Aria of Brynhilder, Zeravira of Coral, Alchemy, Shinko, Casual Heroes FC on Migurt's Armor, Tatachi on Hyperion, Kainazuki from Jenova, Ustarla on Coral, Sothal, Serafrost from Behemoth, Holy Tabasco, Crash 015, Serenity FC on Ultros, Kat Kazuma, Ignis Farragon from Excalibur, Celestia of Fanfrit, Not Quarters from Excalibur, Crovus Moonscar, Private Mikey, Nautic Urasami, Rudy Rudiger, Kill Hackman, Roll Jr., Kiltastic Jones. And considering that this will be coming out on April 1st, no fooling here, but I do need to look at the list and see who is actually... make sure I go over the name list this time because I've been so not keeping up with it over the past few months. Anyway, thank you to all of our sponsors over on Patreon. Let's get to the questions under last video, shall we? All right, so the first question we have here is just straight up a helping with Dmc S Ranks? Yo, dude, mission 8, 10, and 18. Can't S rank them no matter what. Just ignore all the optional fights and make sure the average style stays higher. Is no damage the best way to do it? Awesome, you seem to be as much a fan of the DMC series as me. Also, damn, you got the platinum before me. I was trying to race you on that, but man, I couldn't keep up. Almost, though. Almost. So missions 8, 10, and 18. Now, off the top of my head, I'm remembering mission 8 is the... Is that the... No, it's not the first Dante. That's actually one of the rough Nero missions. Oh, yeah. That one's tough because I don't think you can get the no damage trigger on mission 8. So I'm pretty sure that one is down to an executional thing. I remember you only take the 3 mandatory encounters plus the boss at the end. And for that one, I remember basically every optional encounter, I would just The first two, I would bring a set of 8, whatever they're called, breakers, and then just burn through like 3 of them on the first wave, and then all 5 of them on the second. The last optional fight, I re-equip all the breakers that I want to use, and I basically went with a time slow and just try to destroy everything. The enemies in that are super annoying, a lot of the ranged mages, plus some of the more tanky enemies that are on the ground. But that's how I did that one. I just kept the style rank up and made sure to burn through as many breakers to earn style points as possible. 10 is another really hard one. That one, 10 and 18, I actually did no damage. 10 is one of the tougher ones to do no damage on. 18 can be very, very stressful to do it on, but I personally found 10 to be a little bit harder just for the no damage strat. 10 is pretty easy to just take the 5 or 6 mandatory encounters and then try to keep your style up. I actually had done a bunch of runs of that before, just saying, you know what, let me try to do it with no damage. And really for 10 and 18, it comes down to if you have a ton of red orbs, Dr. Faust is great. 10 in particular, yeah, you can avoid taking damage. Yeah, so Dr. Faust ends up being your best friend on 10 and 18 if you're going for a no damage strat, but you're going to need a ton of red orbs in order to do that. There are some times where I chose not to use them. There's a few encounters where I'm using different forms of the rocket launcher, or maybe going in with the fist weapon to do Rising Dragons was a bit more efficient. But yeah, those ones were tough. 18, I feel like I got a little lucky on. It felt like I got hit at one point, but I guess like the hitbox hadn't quite lined up. But I actually have a video of me doing Mission 18, taking no damage. So I highly recommend you take a look at that video that I posted a couple weeks ago. I'm really looking forward to Bloody Palace. That actually comes out that should already be out by the time you guys see this video on April 1st. So I'm planning on running through all 101 floors of that as soon as that comes out on all 3 characters to get the rest of my achievements. And then I'm fingers crossed that they do more DLC for Devil May Cry 5 in the future, because I love Devil May Cry. If they don't, I really am going to have to go back and do like Devil May Cry 3 and 4 again. And 4 I've actually already got started on, so maybe I should finish that up first. All right, next on the list. These are more speculations than questions, but I gotta ask. I mean, you're asking, so it is a question. If Lalafell evolved into dwarfs, then why is the Warrior of Darkness White Mage a Lala, or the Warrior of Darkness Bard not a Fat Cat? So, a couple of things here. One, they didn't evolve. So basically what happened is way back when Hydaelyn and Zodiark were both completely complete, I guess. Zodiark was broken into 14 different shards. We have the source plus 13 additional shards. Basically, that acts as his prison. Now, what's been happening since then is the shards have gone, basically from the moment that those shards were all separated, they've kind of just gone their own ways. It's not really that anyone evolved, it's just that the way events took place, they act more like alternate dimensions and less of a copy of the way our world is now. So a lot of those just were dwarves in that world. That's just how it panned out for them, how their cultures evolved and started naming the different races. As for why the Warrior of Darkness White Mage is a Lala, Yoshi P himself said they would explain that, but I think the pretty obvious solution is something the Warrior of Darkness said to us back in patch 3.4, was that in order to travel between the shards, they needed to give up their physical form. So it's very likely that they have actually abandoned their original bodies that were back on the first, and now instead have moved forward and basically adopted what would be a more acceptable appearance and such for us. Now, there's a little that goes against that, because when we dig into the echo of the Warrior of Darkness, we see them on their own shard dealing the finishing blow to an Ashen, and they appear to be in their current appearances. It's hard to tell if that's just because they didn't exactly want to spoil how the big differences between dwarves and cats and whatnot on the first are different from ours, but it could also just be that that's the only physical form we know to give them. There's a few things, probably some stuff that's either going to be, quote, retconned or explained, I guess, in depth to the point where we understand why it was that way. But they did specifically say we will be learning why their appearances appear more like the source than they would on the first. As for number 2, with Eulmore being the first version of Limsa, do you think that Amarang could possibly be Ul'dah? There's questions of if Amarang is even dragon speak at this point because of the way that the first handles all their how the first handle their naming conventions of everything. That being said, I don't know if Amarang is Ul'dah's equivalent. Considering they only showed off 2 cities, and that of Eulmore and the Crystarium, and Crystarium is basically like our Mordona, and Eulmore has been labeled the last bastion of humanity, it's possible that the area may have evolved from what our not Ul'dah is, but what our Thanalan is. There's not enough, we haven't seen enough of Amarang to say one way or the other, though. Because with Eulmore and the areas around it, it's a little more clear that it's kind of like Limsa Lominsa. Same with the Crystarium and Lakeland, looking like Mordona. And, of course, the area around the Crystal Tower. So that's a big question mark for me. I wouldn't say no. I'd say that it's a pretty logical thing. But I guess the question is, what part of the world on the first has already been swallowed by the light? You know, if Yulmore's supposed to be the Limsa equivalent, you know, maybe Yulmore never even, maybe the continent that's on never even broke off from Aldenard. So I think it's Vilbrand is where Limsa Lominsa is. So maybe that never broke off from Aldenard in the first place. So maybe it's connected to the mainland. Maybe that island that would represent Vilbrand on our realm, maybe that's all that's left. And so Amarang is actually something more akin to the way that Lenosha is around Limsa Lominsa. But then how would you get Mordona? That's like the Crystal Tower. There's a lot of questions about the actual geography of the first. And so I'll give that a solid, it's a possibility. Can't really say more than that. All right, I saw a lot of text, so I figured I'd give this one a shot before reading it. Hey, Haps. Hope you had a good time in Japan. Second time asking about it after a long time, so here's a returner bonus for whatever food or drink you want from the cafe. Just give me the coasters. That's I don't even need the food or the drink. If they said, hey, we will give you just a coaster for free, I would take it, but thank you. First of all, thank you for your continuous support of the community and your attitude towards the game. It helped me, and I'm sure many others, to get interested in raids without being afraid of other people's judgment. Well, I'm glad I was able to accomplish something. It always feels good to hear thank you. So thank you in return. Now the question, how much do you think should be weighed from the community? Good parsers in Orbone and Siriu. Not mandatory details. I feel like I need them because I don't understand the question entirely. Having started only to raid in late 4.4, I haven't been able to find many statics. The few I found are either lost interest in doing content or soon to be split between the data centers, specifically in EU. Regardless, I found it incredibly difficult to get a fight curriculum. Also because I play Red Mage, so finding a group in the party finder is kind of difficult. Really? Oh, they usually already have a Red Mage. Yes, that can make it tough. Good point. And they only look for melee range because they already have another caster. So dedicate myself to doing the latest 24-man and the latest trial, and more approachable for casual players. It's easier to find groups reaching good DPS. Yeah, those contents are meant to be a lot more approachable in general. I think those contents need to be considered by the community, or they're too casual. Okay, let me be perfectly clear about something, because it seems that you've got I guess kind of I don't know how to describe it. You've got, I guess, the wrong sense of how each of those two things weigh in the community as it is right now. The raid is probably the least weighed in thing that the community does. It's a smaller portion of the community than those that do the extreme trials or the 24-mans. Community cares a lot more about that content. What they don't care about is anything other than a successful performance, because the average player who goes into the 24-man is not really there to try really hard to beat the fight. Their job is to kind of just stay alive and contribute what is necessary. So players, when you have a really good 24-man, it's usually because everyone there is sharing a mindset. You just happen to end up in the duty finder. Happens pretty often when you queue in on a Tuesday as opposed to queuing in on a Monday, when only people left doing it are the people who didn't do it right at the beginning of the week. That's even if there are people who are doing it who even need it anymore. I still like to do it, but that's just me. So it really doesn't have any weight when it comes to raid performance. Yes, if you perform well in a 24-man, at least it's nice to see that you cared enough to try. And that's really all you get out of that. It's kind of the same with extreme trials, but those are weighed a little bit more heavily. If you do not perform well in extreme trials, then someone might see that and go, well, if they can't really do well in Siriu as much as they might be trying, you know, they're not doing like as bad as some other people may do, but they're also not like reaching that level where we really want to appropriate them into a savage raid tier. I'd say that that's probably the one that weighs more, but it really doesn't weigh a lot. It's kind of one of those situations where really your experience in raid matters for raid. You know, it's like when you get out of college and someone goes, oh, you're trying to get this job, well, we're going to need you to have 5 years job experience, but we won't hire you, so you can't get the experience. It's kind of like that scenario. So it comes down to a lot of just joining those pug groups that maybe don't have as high a chance of success, just to get a performance gauge on yourself that you can then pass on to the next people that you're going to perform with, or to improve yourself overall. So I think they are too casual to be considered that much when it comes to raid recruitment, but you know, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try in those situations, because always looking to improve yourself is a good way of preparing yourself to do the Savage and eventually the Ultimate raids. All right, next question. Hey, Happy, hope you had a wonderful time in Japan. Thank you. I did indeed. I want to go back there already. I hope to travel there someday, so how about a first-time bonus of a high five at next JP FanFest? I'll give you one now. Boom, that was your hand, I promise. Anyway, I wasn't really invested in the Dancer hype, so when it was revealed to be a physical range DPS, it actually started to get excited. I'm glad they're putting in the effort to adjust healers at a fundamental level. Bard hasn't really been into me yet, and whenever I try high-end Machinist, my rotation gets dismantled. I get it. Let's not do that. Anyway, so I personally feel that this role desperately needs a refresh. If you were in charge of job design, what adjustments would you make, and how would you approach balancing this role so that each job is fun, effective, and approachable? Let me be clear. I think this is the best Bard's ever been. While Bard has the strongest Bard ever was patch 3.4, between some of the buffs they made, adjustments they made to other jobs, plus the buffs they had been constantly making to Bard. That may be the strongest it's ever been, but thematically and gameplay-wise, there's very few things I don't like about Bard currently. Faux Requiem is one of them. I think the way that it eats at your MP and how long it actually lasts is super underwhelming, and it just doesn't feel good to use right now. I also think that the reliance on a non-guaranteed proc of any kind to access Barrage plus Refulgent Arrow is the other part that sometimes just feels terrible. If when your opener gets delayed and delayed and delayed, and then you eventually never get the proc, and then as soon as you use Barrage on Imperial Arrow, your Refulgent Arrow procs the very next time. It's just a pain in the ass. So those are the only two things I really don't like. I'd say in terms of role actions, which are probably getting completely changed anyway, the ranged role also needs a diversion equivalent, if not just diversion, because it's really lame that their resource regeneration is tied to their enmity reduction as well, or their enmity cut, I should say. Then there's the synergy between Refresh and Foes, where you're really using it for yourself, and it just so happens to be useful for them, for the other players at the time, but you're really trying to time it with your own use. There's little things like that, but the overall design, I hope they really don't change. Machinist, it's a very niche job right now. People who do enjoy it for reasons that I guess are very personal to them. It's not something that is kind of widespread accepted. The performance of Machinist is fine, and I really think Machinist needs to fit in the ranged identity where, and I think it kind of does this a little bit, but could maybe do it a little better. I kind of want it to be the ranged people go to when they're thinking of big damage range DPS. I think Bard and Dancer are always going to fill that. I have all this stuff. Like, look at Bard. 2% crit. It's got the direct hit buff. It's got foes. It's got a healing buff. And I'm not even scratching the surface. Then you go into role actions. You got Palisade. You got TP MP, which TP1 won't matter. But you just think about all the things that Bard offers in terms of increasing the raid's damage or increasing the raid's utility. It's got an Asuna on it or a debuff shield. Like, it's just got crazy things. I think Dancer is going to be closer to that than it will be to Machinist, where I feel like Machinist, well performed, outputs fairly well on its own, while still having some of that, you know, utility in the form of like the, I can't ever remember the name of the skills anymore. The debuff, the you know which one I'm talking about. The one that reduces the enemy's defense towards damage types. I'm sorry, I have avoided Machinist this whole expansion. I've enjoyed it in 3.4 and 3.5, but not so much now. I think it just needs a fundamental change in gameplay without changing much in, I guess, its identity as a more focused damage source coming out of the ranged DPS role. So that's what I think is kind of going to happen for the ranged role overall. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that actually ends up working, because we've seen what less utility and more damage can do when we see a lot of those middle of the pack or even lower DPS melee DPS, you know, like Ninja being the lowest of the melee, but just it's having so much incentive to bring it, versus the Samurai, which only has a slashing debuff, and that's really, do we count that? And yet its personal outputs being so high that people have started to care less and less that it's kind of the meme job. So I'm really interested to see how that dynamic ends up working. But I think overall they nailed Bard, and I hope they'll nail Dancer. All right, we've got another one here. Hey, Haps. I understand. Hi, by the way. I understand that I make fun of other people for not saying hi, so if I don't say it's kind of messed up. I understand that the dev team is thinking about making tanks default to main or off. So let me be clear. They're not... Okay, actually, let me finish the question because it's not a lot of text. However, my question is, would it be easier to balance tanks if they were the only ones who could apply weapon resistance debuffs? So I guess I'll tackle this in two pieces. For one, they're not making tanks default to one or the other. If you look at the way the jobs are designed right now in the tank role, you would pretty much agree that Warrior is the premier main tank, Paladin is the premier off tank, and Dark Knight's kind of flexible between the two. Very similar to how I guess you'd compare the healers. The difference being is that it's not so much that they are or aren't flexible, it's that while those are the most optimal, it's not like any other configuration is unplayable. You know, you don't always need the Warrior, you don't always need the Dark Knight, you don't always need the Paladin. There's plenty of situations where any one of the batch could actually be a good choice. Warrior, Dark Knight, Warrior, Paladin, Dark Knight, Paladin. There's plenty of different scenarios where any of those configurations may or may not be more or less effective. So it's not so much that they're looking to make them default to that. It's that they're kind of designing them with the, I guess, intent that players will probably lean towards pushing one of them into one of those roles anyway. And tanking has become less about main tank, off tank overall regardless. Like, there's always, like, it's pretty much who pulls the boss and who doesn't pull the boss. And from that point on, it's a matter of what the fight demands out of both of the tanks. You know, you see some crazy cool stuff with paladins covering tank busters, so you don't have to do tank swaps, and then you have the synergy between tanks making sure they understand their provoke shirks and their ultimatums and where all of these things go and how to minimize, I guess, struggles or missteps between the two. And that's really the way that tanks work. But we still do break them down into that main tank, off tank role. Now, in terms of balancing the tanks better, weapon resistance debuffs are a huge problem in the game right now. Something I've wanted gone for a very long time. Now, while I do know that during the European FanFest, they specifically said Gunbreaker did slashing damage, I am hoping that they're just doing away with resistances overall, because to me the resistances are kind of like Protect. Protect is a completely meaningless spell. It's only meaningful because we don't have that 10% defense and magic defense without it. If you took it away and adjusted the magic defense and defense, or the damage that actually comes out of the enemies, you suddenly you realize that that's such an, I guess, an arbitrary existence. It's only there because they decided it's going to be there. But it doesn't serve any important or interesting gameplay purposes other than when someone dying, you needing to recast Protect on them. It's kind of the same with the damage debuffs. Pretty much as soon as the job's present in a raid team, that debuff is automatic. They don't have to think about applying it. It's just an automatic thing for them existing in that specific group of 8. So it doesn't really offer a lot from a gameplay perspective either. There's ways to make jobs synergize that don't involve just flat out making another job or jobs that perform I guess a similar damage type to you, making them perform better. It's how we've gotten to this point where Dragoon and Bard are pretty much considered mandatory together. It's caused issues in the past with slashing, where warriors were refusing to do that combo for the longest time, and what necessitated them to move the slashing debuff onto a different skill. It's been a constant thorn in the side, kind of like the way that the healers have turned up with the whole pure versus damage. I don't think this makes them any easier to balance, and I think they should do away with those damage resistance downs overall. I just think what you'll see is 2 jobs that are clearly better in the main tank role, 2 jobs that are clearly better in the off tank role when it comes to the tanks. Look at it like this. Imagine this is a scale. If you're on this side of the scale, it means you're a better off tank. If you're on this side of the scale, it means you're a better main tank. It's not going to be 2 jobs at polarizing ends of the scale. It's going to be like, there's going to be like 1 job here and a job here, and then you cross the middle line and there's like 1 job here and 1 job here. Meaning that if you brought 2 off tanks, you still have 2 different off tanks, and one of them is a lot closer to being as effective as a main tank. So then you'd still have that kind of priority system going down the entire chart of, you know, where anything belongs. It means bringing 2 main tanks or bringing 2 off tanks is perfectly fine, because it means different advantages for the team based on what the jobs are actually bringing. Now, mathematically, there's always going to be one that's absolutely superior. What we're afraid of is the 2 off tanks being higher damage. Granted, Warrior right now is the premier main tank and is also one of the most damaging tanks in the game. So Warrior might just be too powerful right now. In fact, I would definitely say that it is. But it just goes to show that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it doesn't necessarily create the same effect as people may be interpreting it as. All right, next question is a short one too. Hey, Mr. Happy. Hi. I was rewatching one of your previous Mondays and you mentioned having an Ifrit hard mode blue mage kill. I was wondering if you're still thinking of uploading that video, because even though you said it might be boring, I think it would be really cool to see level 50 blue kill level 50 Ifrit. You want to know what that fight was? Okay, so here's how you do that. Full vitality accessories, die enough times to get full echo, so you have as much health as you could possibly have. It's not even for the damage necessarily, it's for the health, although the damage does help in the later parts of the fight. And then you use 1,000 needles 371 times. I think 371 or 372. The only time that really changes is when the nails spawn. I think you need to kill at least 1 nail. I think I actually killed 3 nails on one of the attempts, but you basically drop Mighty Guard right after a tank bust. You full heal right after a tank bust. You drop Mighty Guard. You quickly pop the primal skills on 1 or 2 of the nails, and then you 1,000 needles the remaining one. And you just your goal is to basically just instantly kill them in the quickest way, and to get most of them dead, and then heal back up to full, because then Hellfire won't do enough damage to kill you. And then the second half of the fight is just more, and you basically have about a 45-minute timer on the fight, and it takes about, depending on, I guess, how many AoEs you decide to eat to cast extra 1,000 needles, it can take like 40 minutes-ish approximately, so the timer's a little tight. It is so fucking boring. So I'll give you a solid maybe. And we're on to the next one. Hey, Haps, I don't have an interesting bonus to give you or your girlfriend, so instead I'll wish you all the success in the world. Hey, that's a pretty damn good bonus, although you wished it and didn't grant it. All the same thanks. Question, with how successful 14 has been since launch, do you suspect Square will at some point transition into a semi-sequel, such as a completely new game client for Final Fantasy XIV? With games as a whole advancing at a rapid rate in graphical fidelity on all platforms, and Korean MMOs really being at the forefront of this in the PC space, sometimes wonder if Square will be able to hang on to their top dog position in the MMO market 5 to 10 years from now. I find it difficult how they were able to remaster, remake all content up until now and still support older hardware. The simple solution would be to take 1.0, 2.0 route, support both versions with 2.0 going forward. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean there, but then you split. Yeah, okay. No, you don't want that. No, you definitely don't want that. You don't want to go back to anything 1.0 related. I'm curious what you think, how do you handle this? So I'd like to point out a couple things. First, obviously, is World of Warcraft. Not exactly a very graphically intense game. You know, and that, despite how you may feel about BFA right now, has survived and has been the top dog for many, many years, with only really Final Fantasy XIV coming to challenge it at a persistent basis, especially from a subscription MMO spot. Now, that being said, one of the big things, and you specifically mentioned Korean MMOs, and a lot of people like to compare the textures of a Korean MMO that they say is free to play, is dumb shit, and does not have the same budget as Final Fantasy XIV, and thus should not have superior graphics, versus Final Fantasy XIV, where zooming in can lead to the meshes getting a little messed up, especially if you're not on a higher graphic setting, and textures looking a little flat. So I'd like to point out that the main thing is focus in the content. Final Fantasy XIV is very much a game that is focused on what the next content it will bring. Yes, there are people who are looking at graphics or looking at how things appear and doing their best to make sure they appear well. And yes, maybe at some point they do decide to do some sort of major graphical upgrade that doesn't just involve something like DX12, for example. However, the focus of Final Fantasy XIV, as its development goes on, the main team, the majority of those hundreds of people, are focusing on the next piece of content, the next patch, the next amount of story. Whereas that Korean MMO needs those games to look as good as they do, because what they're trying to do is not let you focus on what's the next piece of content. They may trickle a little things into the Western market gradually so they have a steady flow of content, but they want their games to look good so when they sell cosmetics in their in-game stores, that they look as good as possible. They're as attractive to the player as possible. Of course, 14 has its Mog Station. It has its cosmetic items that are on there. So maybe you could argue that they should kind of have the same focus. But they're not thinking, oh, we need to make our game look better so our cosmetics sell better. They're thinking, we need to get this next patch out because we're trying to earn people's subscriptions. It's a difference in mentality. Whereas the Korean MMO wants to nickel and dime you out of everything that you think looks pretty. So I think that I won't say it couldn't happen. I don't think it's going to be the focus outside of a DX12 upgrade in the PS5 eventually. And those being newer options with higher graphic maximums, but still needing to fit within the graphical engine that Final Fantasy XIV has already fit itself. We have gotten some graphics increases over the years. Yes, textures could definitely be better, but I don't see that ever being a major focus, nor do I see them ever releasing a completely new game client for Final Fantasy XIV overall. But those are, obviously, I would love to be wrong. I would love updated graphics. I'm never going to say no to something like that. It's just I don't think it's the direction they're going to go. All right, I think I'll take like 2 or 3 more questions, and then I will wrap it up for the day. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hope you're doing all right. Hello, and yes, I am. Thank you for asking. I'm not sure if it's been discussed, but with all new info on the 5.0 story and traveling to another shard in the same race as having another name, I'm starting to wonder if the signs we've seen in the trailer are really the characters we know. It's interesting in Astro, Udion J, Black Mages, Tola, and Tank Thancred, all with different gears and looks, including the Matoya thing. Don't you think it's very likely the signs are from the first shard that we'll be meeting along the way? But also explain why the trust system only uses with these characters and only on Shadowbringers content. What are your thoughts? Thank you. Keep up the great job. So I've actually discussed this on stream quite a few times. It's worth mentioning that, and I kind of need to go back to a previous, again, the source and the shards all broke from each other a really long time ago. It's not that there are exact replicas of our characters and of the same people on another realm. I mean, we don't have Fat Makotes, for example. You know, our Lalafels are dwarves, and it raises a lot of questions. But there's no doubt that they are, at the very least, the same bodies of the people that are coming over from our realm. Now, if they're being used in the same way, it's another question. Obviously, there's a lot of questions because right now we have their bodies, the husks that remain at the very least, in our care. They just don't have a soul in them, which means that the soul would theoretically have moved over there, but would it need to have inhabited another body? And would they have gotten ones that are so accurate? Is it possible that our job is going to be to bring their bodies through so that their souls, so they don't have to leave their bodies behind and their souls can inhabit the same body, but after going through to the first, and thus probably traveling through a great amount of ether? It would explain why Thancred has gone through a pretty significant change, because he can probably manipulate his ether again. The Matoya thing, again, the most I think is either he's referring to Matoya indirectly, where like he's not speaking to the person in front of him, he's just kind of thinking to the first person he'd asked this question, or Matoya is inhabiting Ishtola's body and it was the one who piloted it to bring it over into the first. So there's a ton of questions and there's really no way to say anything for certain, but the theory that I believe in the absolute least is that those are alternate sounds. The number of events that would have to have lined up to lead to the exact same bodies and the exact same appearances in another world that does not share our form of evolution and has just completely changed from the way that we know our life, the odds of it are just so incredibly low that it would not be the theory I would subscribe to. Next one, and this one looks like it'll be short, so I think I'll answer one more after. Hey Haps, hopefully my question gets in even though it's Monday. Yeah, you got a whole extra week, so you're alright, don't worry about it. Hello, by the way. When the devs talk about focusing on healer balance and mention how Scholar is pretty powerful, could the splitting of Scholar from Arcanist help facilitate the addition of a new healer? I don't see how splitting Scholar from So you got to remember, it's not so much the idea of splitting Scholar from Arcanist. What's been talked about in the past, something they've said they would like to do, but it has a lot of technical and lore implications, is removing the classes altogether. So you wouldn't just be splitting it from Arcanist, you'd be removing Arcanist, and Summoner and Scholar would have to be their own thing if you were going to ever accomplish that. But splitting Scholar from Arcanist doesn't... I don't see how that presents an opportunity or helps facilitate the addition of a new healer. What will facilitate the addition of a new healer is what their goal is to remove the divisive way they've designed them in the first place with pure healer and shield healing. What I suspect will happen most likely is all the jobs will kind of move towards more regular of both, but it'll be about how they actually achieve it. You know, what is the job's identity? For Scholar, is it Etherflow and the Fairy? You know, maybe change the focus to be a little bit more on those things and not so much about the shield healing. For Astro, you know, it's got that flexibility. It can do either or, and it just happens to be, you know, one of the better ones in terms of, you know, pure healers, especially with Star and the fact that they still offer a good amount of utility. They have their cards, but should their identity be about being this flexible mage that can fit as pure or shield, or should it be about their cards, their stars, the, I guess, accessing their faster cast times, almost their quasi time mage-esque theme, because that's not what their identity really falls into right now. And White Mage doesn't have one at all. Is theirs always going to be the kind of beginner friendly huge potency healer, or is it going to be moved into something, I guess, a little bit more exciting as an identity? I think removing this division between pure and shield healers does more for facilitating a new healer than anything else. All right, this is definitely going to be the last question because it looks like there's two in this one anyway, so I don't really know how long they're going to take. Hello, Mrhappy, long-time viewer, first-time asker, so I have a first-time bonus of having a lifetime supply of favorite food. Sushi. I was trying to think of what it would be. If it's a snack, it's beef jerky. If it's like food, it's sushi, hands down. Thank you. Two questions, if you have time for two. All right, yep. So first question is about Phoenix Downs in Final Fantasy XIV. Do you think we could do more with them, like removing the cap on them and usable in battle? Just seems like a resource that has been forgotten about that could be used more efficiently. For example, maybe you could use it to revive your rezzers when they all die. I'm very much in the opposite boat. I think resurrecting is already way too powerful in Final Fantasy XIV, and it's nice to have it in like casual 4-man content or 24-mans where everyone just dies constantly because no one's fucking paying attention, or even in Party Finder groups for Savage modes and stuff. You know, when things start to fall apart, it's nice to be able to res everyone up and maybe salvage what would otherwise be a dead run. But it's so powerful that like a lot of the more punishing, or what you would imagine would be the more punishing things, if it doesn't instantly wipe the whole raid, it's pretty much not considered a punishing mechanic nowadays. You'll just have someone throw a res out there. I can think of a few points in Ultimate where obviously that doesn't apply, but I think resurrections are too powerful in 14 as a whole, and could probably do with some limitations in place. like one player being maybe having 2 resurrects maximum per player. I don't think we need more ways to resurrect people though. I think Red Mage just got that covered way too well as it is. Like the healers have it, summoners, and I hope they don't give resurrections to more jobs because it's just, I don't think it's good for the balance of the game and the challenge of the game. Secondly, and I know it's a stupid question, but how do I donate money to you? Yo, thanks for giving me the opportunity to just hashtag, dude, maximum sellout right now. Hashtag maximum sellout. So first of all, I try not to use the word donate because donate, I guess, implies a charity. I like to believe that if people are supporting over on Patreon or subscribing on Twitch or tipping through PayPal or doing any of that stuff, that's because I've created something that they want to express value on. Not, oh, this dude needs my money, I want to be the good guy and give it to him kind of thing. I don't know. I'm very particular about that. So we try to use words like tip and support and stuff like that. Nothing against you for choosing to use it. I'm just letting you know how I feel about the word in particular. Second of all, I just listed a bunch, you know, Patreon. Honestly, though, like, people ask this sometimes, like, yeah, there's Patreon, Twitch subs, multiple tiers, gifting subs, cheers, tips directly, merchandise, sponsors, all that kind of stuff. Realistically, you are here watching this video. When I first started making YouTube videos, that was the only like pretense that I operated on, that people would watch the content and that would support the channel. And so you being here is all, just so you know, is all you really need to do. Anything else is extra, and you don't even need to be here. You're choosing to spend your time here, which is why people in my position at least should be grateful for everyone who clicks on a video, comments on a video, likes a video, engages with a video, maybe takes that and then engages with other platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, whatever. We want that engagement because that pushes our channel to a new place. It motivates us. It encourages us. I'd like to say that. I guess I shouldn't be speaking for everybody, but that's at least how I feel. And it's what's led to a lot of kind of emotional things happening for me over the last couple of weeks with the trip to Japan and all sorts of, and just the specific time of year, I suppose, because I get to remind myself of how lucky I am to have people who are willing to even ask questions like what you're asking right now. And it does mean a lot to me that you're even asking this because that's what you want to do. So you can pick any of those things, whatever one. Don't worry about, oh, which one's best for you. For me, it's what's best for you. And if just being able to show up every day is what's best for you, then that's all I would ever ask for. I would never expect someone to do anything more than that. And I'm lucky that they do that in the first place. So sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent. That should be nothing new to anyone who watches my content regularly, but it's something I feel very strongly about. So hopefully I've made a point, even if it's, I guess, maybe not the point that you necessarily even wanted me to make in the first place. Thank you for wishing me a wonderful time at JP FanFest. It was excellent. And with that, that's going to be the last question for our Q&A this week. If you did get your question asked, be sure to ask it in the YouTube comment section below this video, and we'll be taking a look at it for next week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you again to all of our Patreon sponsors. And one last little thing. If you missed it, I did go to JP FanFest in Tokyo. There's tons of videos about the news that came out of it, my interview with Yoshida, my trip to Japan itself, my trip to the Eorzea Cafe. Go give that a watch. Go see what it was like. Go learn a little bit. And if you're interested in going to Japan, hopefully it gives you at least a little insight as to how I felt being in a country where I was very, very unfamiliar and very nervous and scared. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. I will see you guys in next week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. And until then, take care.